The clock behind the bar read 11:47 p.m. when Ellie Wells finally stopped moving. Her shift at Fiore d'Oro had been relentless. 8 hours of balancing trays, memorizing orders, smiling through exhaustion. Her lower back complained with every step, but she'd learned to ignore it years ago. 3 more tables had just cleared out, leaving generous tips that would help cover rent this month. She tucked the bills into her apron pocket and exhaled slowly, leaning against the polished mahogany counter near the entrance. The restaurant was winding down. Most guests had left, but a few lingered over espresso and dessert wine. The kitchen staff was already breaking down stations, the sounds of clattering pots and running water echoing from the back. Manhattan never truly slept, but this late at night, the energy shifted. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, taxicabs cruised past slower than usual. Streetlights cast amber pools on the wet pavement. It had rained earlier, leaving the sidewalks slick and reflective. Ellie was calculating her tips when she noticed the man at table 12 stand up. Nicholas Pellegrini. She knew his name because everyone who worked here knew his name. He came in twice a week, always reserved the same corner table, always brought men in expensive suits who spoke in hushed tones. The managers treated him differently. The kitchen prepared his meals with extra care. The wine he ordered never appeared on the bill. Ellie had served his table once, months ago, when the regular waitress called in sick. He'd been polite but distant, his dark eyes scanning her face for exactly 2 seconds before returning to the menu. She remembered thinking he looked tired despite the perfectly tailored charcoal suit. There was something heavy in the way he carried himself, like a man who'd stopped sleeping well a long time ago. Tonight he stood with 3 other men, all of them adjusting jacket buttons and checking phones. They moved toward the exit with the casual confidence of people who owned the world. Or at least this part of it. Ellie turned her attention to counting the cash in her apron when movement near the entrance caught her eye. The valet. Not the regular one. This guy was new. Maybe started last week. She'd seen him twice before, both times looking uncomfortable in the standard black vest and bow tie. Right now, he looked worse than uncomfortable. He was sweating, not the light sheen from hustling in summer heat, but actual beads rolling down his temples despite the cool November air. His hands shook as he held a set of car keys, fingers fumbling to grip them properly. Ellie frowned. Something felt wrong. The way he kept glancing toward the street, the way he wouldn't make eye contact with anyone, not even the hostess who smiled at him. Nicholas Pellegrini pushed through the front door, followed by his 3 associates. The valet straightened immediately, almost dropping the keys. "Your car, sir," the valet said, voice too high, too rushed. He practically jogged toward the sleek black Mercedes parked directly in front of the restaurant. Nicholas followed at a measured pace, saying something to the man beside him that Ellie couldn't hear. She should have gone back to work, should have finished her closing tasks, but her feet carried her toward the entrance instead, some instinct pulling her forward. The valet brought the Mercedes around fast, too fast. He left the driver's door hanging open and backed away quickly, holding out the keys like they burned his hand. Nicholas reached for them, nodding once in dismissal. That's when Ellie saw it. Through the driver's side window, illuminated by the restaurant's exterior lights, a thin red wire visible beneath the dashboard. Just a flash of color that didn't belong. Her grandmother used to restore old cars in Detroit, taught Ellie the basics. Wiring in a Mercedes looked nothing like that. Nothing in a modern car should have exposed colored wires running loose under the panel. Her body reacted before her brain fully processed the information. "Don't get in!" Ellie's voice cut through the quiet street as she broke into a run. Her worn sneakers slapped against wet pavement. Nicholas turned sharply, hand already on the doorframe. She grabbed his arm with both hands, yanking him backward with force born from pure panic. He reacted on instinct, twisting to break her grip, his other hand moving defensively to push her away. But she held on, stumbling when he shoved her back. "There's something under the dashboard," she gasped, pointing frantically at the car. "A wire. Red. It shouldn't be there." Nicholas froze. His dark eyes locked onto hers for a fraction of a second, searching for deception or madness. Then his gaze shifted to the car, specifically to where she was pointing. One of his men stepped forward. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the alert posture of someone trained to handle threats. "Boss?" Nicholas held up one hand, a gesture so subtle it was almost invisible. "Ethan, get everyone back. 5 meters. Now." The man, Ethan, didn't question. He moved immediately, pulling the other 2 men away from the vehicle. Nicholas grabbed Ellie's wrist and pulled her with him, putting distance between them and the Mercedes. "What exactly did you see?" Nicholas's voice was calm, controlled, but there was steel underneath, red wire, under the steering column, visible through the window. It was just hanging there, not connected properly. Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs. "My grandmother rebuilt cars. That's not normal. That's not factory wiring." Nicholas stared at the Mercedes for 3 long seconds. Then he pulled out his phone and stepped further back, bringing Ellie with him. She realized he still had hold of her wrist, his grip firm but not painful. "Everyone inside," he ordered quietly to his men. "Clear the sidewalk." Ethan was already moving, ushering the restaurant staff who'd gathered near the entrance back through the doors. The hostess looked confused. The manager started to protest, but stopped when Ethan shot him a look. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Ellie counted her own heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. The explosion was louder than anything she'd ever heard in her life. The Mercedes erupted into a ball of fire and twisted metal. The blast wave hit like a physical wall, shoving Ellie backward. She felt her feet leave the ground for a moment before Nicholas's body collided with hers, both of them hitting the pavement hard. He covered her. His full weight pressed her into the cold, wet concrete as debris rained down around them. Pieces of metal, glass, burning rubber. The heat washed over them in a wave, followed immediately by choking black smoke. Ellie couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. Nicholas shifted his weight, pulling her up with him. His face was inches from hers, lips moving, but she couldn't hear the words through the ringing. Then sound crashed back in all at once. Car alarms, screaming, sirens already wailing in the distance, the crackle of flames consuming what was left of the Mercedes. "Are you hurt?" Nicholas's voice cut through the chaos. His hands moved over her shoulders, her arms, checking for injuries with surprising gentleness. Ellie's palms stung where they'd scraped against the pavement. The right side of her face felt raw, probably from the asphalt, but otherwise, she was intact. "I'm okay. I think. I'm okay." Nicholas stood, pulling her up with him. Ethan appeared beside them, phone already to his ear, barking orders to someone. People poured out of the restaurant now, drawn by the explosion. The manager stood in the doorway, face pale, hand over his mouth. The valet was gone. Ellie scanned the street frantically. He'd been right there, just 20 feet away when she'd yelled. Now the sidewalk was empty except for panicked onlookers. "The valet," Ellie said urgently, grabbing Nicholas's sleeve. "The one who brought the car. He's gone." Nicholas's expression didn't change, but something dark flashed in his eyes. "Ethan." "Already on it," Ethan replied, still on his phone. "Checking cameras. He bolted the second you stepped back." The first police car arrived within 90 seconds, followed closely by a fire truck. Then another police car. Then unmarked vehicles that Ellie instinctively knew weren't regular cops. Men in dark suits and FBI windbreakers emerged, establishing a perimeter with frightening efficiency. A bomb in Manhattan meant federal jurisdiction. Automatic response. Ellie watched them work, her mind still struggling to catch up with what had just happened. She'd saved someone's life. Multiple lives. She'd seen something wrong and acted without thinking. Now reality was setting in, cold and sharp. One of the FBI agents approached Nicholas, badge already out. They spoke in low tones, too quiet for Ellie to hear over the commotion. Nicholas's posture remained relaxed, cooperative. But Ellie noticed how Ethan positioned himself strategically between his boss and the growing crowd of first responders. A paramedic touched Ellie's shoulder, making her jump. "Miss, are you injured? Let me take a look at your face." She let the woman guide her toward an ambulance, cleaning the scrapes on her cheek and palms with stinging antiseptic. The paramedic wrapped gauze around her left hand where the worst abrasion had torn the skin. "You're very lucky." the paramedic said softly. If you'd been any closer to that vehicle when it went up. Ellie nodded numbly. Lucky. Right. Through the controlled chaos, she watched Nicholas speak with what appeared to be a senior FBI agent. The man gestured toward the burning wreckage, asked questions. Nicholas answered calmly, occasionally pointing toward the restaurant. At one point, the agent's gaze shifted to Ellie, and she felt the weight of that attention like a spotlight. Before Ethan could steer her away, the senior agent peeled off from Nicholas and crossed toward the ambulance. Miss Wells? He asked, flashing his badge just long enough for her to register the seal. His voice was steady, practiced, the kind that made chaos feel briefly organized. I need the short version. What made you look under the dash? Ellie swallowed. Her mouth tasted like smoke. There was a red wire. It didn't belong there. And the valet. He was watching me. When the car went up, he ran. Describe him, the agent said, already taking notes. Anything. Height, jacket, accent, the way he moved. She forced herself to focus, to pull details out of the fog. The agent nodded once, clipped and approving. Then he handed her a card. You did the right thing. We'll take a formal statement when you're steadier. Your security can coordinate with my office, but you don't disappear on us. Understood? Ellie closed her fingers around the card like it was a lifeline. Understood. Ethan broke away from the group and approached her quickly. Miss Wells, we need to move you now. What? Why? Ellie stood up too fast, swaying slightly. The FBI are going to want to question me. I saw the valet, I can describe him. And you will, Ethan assured her, already guiding her away from the ambulance. His hand on her elbow was gentle but insistent. But not here. Not right now. You're in shock. You need somewhere safe to process what just happened. I'm fine. I can give a statement. Miss Wells. Ethan stopped walking, turned to face her directly. His eyes were kind, but serious. Someone just tried to kill my boss with a car bomb. You stopped them. That makes you a witness to attempted murder and possibly a target yourself. The people who did this, they don't leave loose ends. The words hit harder than the blast wave had. Ellie's legs went weak. A black SUV pulled up to the curb, somehow bypassing the police barricade. The back door opened. Nicholas appeared beside them, his suit jacket torn at the shoulder. A small cut above his left eyebrow that he hadn't bothered to address. Get in, he said quietly. Not a command. Not quite a request either. Something in between. Ellie looked back at the burning car, at the FBI agents taking photographs, at the crowd of onlookers filming with their phones. She thought about the valet's sweating face, the red wire, the 3 seconds between her warning and the explosion. I don't even know you, she whispered. I know, Nicholas replied. But you saved my life tonight. Let me return the favor. Somewhere in the distance, more sirens wailed. The fire crackled and popped as firefighters sprayed it with foam. An FBI agent called out, looking for witnesses. Ellie looked at Nicholas Pellegrini, really looked at him. His dark eyes held hers steadily, waiting for her decision. Not pressuring, just waiting. She got in the SUV. Ethan slid in behind her, and Nicholas took the front passenger seat. The driver pulled away smoothly, merging into late-night traffic before the FBI agents could reach them. Ellie watched the chaos recede through the back window, her reflection ghostly in the tinted glass. She could still smell smoke in her hair, could still feel the vibration of the explosion in her chest. Where are we going? Her voice sounded distant, disconnected. Somewhere safe, Nicholas said from the front seat. I promise you, Ellie Wells, you're safe now. But as the city lights blurred past the windows and her heartbeat refused to slow, Ellie wondered if safe was something she'd ever feel again. Sunlight cut through unfamiliar windows, harsh and unwelcome against Ellie's closed eyelids. She tried to turn away from it, but her body protested with immediate sharp complaints. Her palms stung. Her right cheek throbbed. Every muscle felt bruised, like she'd been thrown down a flight of stairs. Memory slammed back with brutal clarity. The explosion. The heat. Nicholas Pellegrini covering her body as metal rained from the sky. Ellie's eyes snapped open. This wasn't her apartment. The ceiling was too high, painted a soft cream instead of her water-stained beige. The bed beneath her was too comfortable, the mattress supporting her back without the familiar sag in the middle. She sat up too quickly, head spinning, and took in her surroundings with growing panic. The room was spacious and minimalist, modern furniture in neutral tones. A single piece of abstract art on the wall, all geometric shapes in grays and blacks. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a view she recognized immediately. Central Park stretched out below, trees still holding on to autumn colors, which meant she was somewhere on the Upper East Side, somewhere expensive. She was still wearing her work clothes from last night, black pants and white button-down wrinkled beyond redemption. Someone had removed her shoes and placed them neatly beside the bed. Her apron was folded on a chair near the door, tips still tucked inside. Ellie swung her legs over the side of the bed, testing her weight. Everything hurt, but nothing felt broken. The gauze on her left hand had been changed while she slept, fresh white bandages replacing the paramedics' hasty wrapping. Someone had cleaned the scrape on her cheek, too. She could feel the sting of antiseptic when she touched it gently. The door was closed, but not locked. She tried the handle carefully, half expecting resistance. It turned smoothly. The hallway outside was equally immaculate. Hardwood floors polished to a mirror shine, more abstract art, recessed lighting that gave everything a soft, expensive glow. She followed the hall toward voices, her sock feet silent on the wood. The apartment opened into a massive living space. Open-concept kitchen with marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. A living area with leather furniture arranged around a glass coffee table. And beyond it all, those floor-to-ceiling windows offering an unobstructed view of Central Park from what had to be at least 20 stories up. Ethan stood in the kitchen, pouring espresso from a machine that probably cost more than Ellie's monthly rent. He looked up when she appeared, his expression neutral, but not unfriendly. "Good morning, Miss Wells," he said calmly, like finding confused women wandering his kitchen was a regular occurrence. "Coffee?" Ellie's throat was dry. She nodded, not trusting her voice yet. Ethan poured a second cup, adding nothing to it, and slid it across the marble counter toward her. "It's 11 in the morning. You slept about 14 hours. That's normal after the kind of shock you experienced." 11 in the morning. Ellie's shift at the restaurant started at 4. No, wait. She probably didn't have a shift anymore. She probably didn't have a job anymore. The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through her chest. "Where am I?" Her voice came out rougher than expected. "Upper East Side. Secure property. You're safe here." "That's not what I asked." Before Ethan could respond, the front door opened. Nicholas Pellegrini walked in carrying a white pharmacy bag, still wearing what looked like the same suit from last night, though he'd changed the torn jacket for a fresh one. The small cut above his eyebrow had been cleaned but not bandaged, a thin red line visible against his olive skin. He stopped when he saw Ellie, his dark eyes scanning her face with the same assessing look from the night before. "You're awake. Good. How do you feel?" "Like I got blown up," Ellie said flatly. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile but close. "Fair assessment." He set the pharmacy bag on the counter. "Antiseptic, clean bandages, pain medication if you need it. Nothing prescription, just over the counter, but it should help." Ellie stared at the bag, then at him, then at Ethan, who'd resumed drinking his espresso like this was all perfectly normal. "Why am I here? Where's here exactly? And why wasn't I taken to a hospital or police station or literally anywhere that makes sense?" Nicholas pulled out one of the bar stools and sat, gesturing for her to do the same. After a moment's hesitation, Ellie sat across from him, the marble counter a buffer between them. "You saved my life last night," Nicholas said quietly. "You saved the lives of 3 of my men. I owe you a debt that I can never fully repay. You don't owe me anything. I just saw something wrong and reacted, and I'm grateful for that reaction." He leaned forward slightly, his full attention focused on her in a way that made her uncomfortably aware of how disheveled she must look. "But we need to talk about what happens next. You witnessed an attempted assassination. You can identify the man who delivered the vehicle. That makes you valuable to law enforcement and dangerous to the people who planted that bomb." The word assassination made everything feel more real and more terrifying. "Who were they?" Who would try to kill you with a car bomb in the middle of Manhattan? Nicholas exchanged a glance with Ethan before answering. The Albanian Mafia. They've been expanding aggressively into territories in Manhattan and the Bronx for the past 8 months. My family has certain business interests in those areas. There's been tension. Ellie processed that carefully. Business interests. That was one way to describe whatever a man like Nicholas Pellegrini did for a living. She wasn't naive. She'd lived in New York long enough to understand that power and money didn't always come from legitimate sources. So this was what? A mob hit? Yes. At least he was honest about it. Ellie picked up her coffee cup, needing something to do with her hands. The espresso was perfect, rich and smooth without bitterness. Of course it was. And now they're going to come after me because I ruined their plan? Possibly. Probably. Nicholas's expression remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Albanian operations don't leave witnesses. They can't afford to. And you didn't just witness. You actively prevented their objective. That makes you a problem they'll want to eliminate. The coffee turned sour in Ellie's stomach. She set the cup down carefully, afraid her shaking hands would spill it. I need to call my manager. I need to explain why I didn't show up today. I need to... She reached for her phone, patting her pockets before realizing it wasn't there. Nicholas pulled it from his jacket and held it up, not offering it to her yet. Cell phones are traceable, he said gently. Tower pings, GPS data, even when you think they're off. If the Albanians have any technical capability at all, and they do, they can locate you through your phone within hours. So I'm just supposed to disappear? From my entire life? For now, yes. Ellie stood up so fast the bar stool scraped against the floor with a harsh sound. No, absolutely not. I have bills due. My rent is $1,850, and it's due in 5 days. I have student loans. I have a life that I worked very hard to build, and I'm not throwing it away because some criminals are mad at me for not dying. Her voice had risen louder than she intended. Ethan shifted his weight slightly, a subtle movement that drew her attention. He wasn't threatening, just present, watchful. Nicholas remained seated, maddeningly calm. I understand your frustration, Miss Wells. Do you? Do you really? Ellie's hands clenched into fists, ignoring the sting from her bandaged palm. Because from where I'm standing, you live in this place. She gestured at the expensive apartment around them. You have people like Ethan, who do whatever you tell them. You snap your fingers and problems go away. I don't have that. I have $42 in my checking account, and a landlord who doesn't care about sob stories. I can compensate you for your time, Nicholas offered. $5,000 per week while you're under protection. That should more than cover your expenses. I don't want your money. The words came out sharper than she meant them. I don't want to be bought or paid off or whatever this is. I just want my normal life back. Nicholas stood then, moving around the counter until he was closer to her. Not crowding her space, but close enough that she had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. Your normal life ended the moment you screamed, "Don't get in," he said quietly. I wish that wasn't true. I wish you'd looked the other way, and I'd gotten into that car and you'd finished your shift and gone home, and none of this would be your problem. But that's not what happened. You chose to act. You chose to save a stranger. And now both of us have to deal with the consequences of that choice. Ellie wanted to argue, but the truth of his words settled over her like a weight. He was right. She'd inserted herself into something dangerous, and there was no taking it back now. The FBI is going to want to talk to me, she said, grasping for some piece of normal procedure. I'm a witness to a federal crime. They're not just going to let you hide me away. The FBI does want to talk to you, Nicholas confirmed. My lawyers are currently negotiating the terms of that interview. Given the credible threat to your life, they're arguing that any testimony should be delayed until your safety can be guaranteed. It's a reasonable argument that the Bureau will likely accept, at least temporarily. Of course he had lawyers. Plural. Ellie sank back onto the bar stool, suddenly exhausted despite sleeping 14 hours. Her whole body ached. Her mind felt foggy, struggling to process too much information too fast. How long? She asked. How long do you think I need to hide? I don't know. Could be days. Could be weeks. until we can identify who specifically ordered the hit and neutralize the threat. Neutralize the threat, Ellie repeated. What does that mean exactly? Nicholas didn't answer, which was answer enough. Ethan cleared his throat softly. Miss Wells, while you were sleeping, I took the liberty of contacting Fiore Doro on your behalf. I sent a formal letter of resignation citing a family emergency. Your final paycheck will be mailed to your address. Ellie's head snapped toward him. You quit my job for me? I ended your employment professionally, Ethan corrected. It needed to be done. You can't go back there. The Albanians know that's where you work. It would be the first place they'd look. He was right. Of course he was right. But that didn't make it any less infuriating. So what am I supposed to do? Ellie asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Just sit here in this gilded cage and wait for you to tell me when it's safe to have a life again? You're not a prisoner, Nicholas said firmly. You're a guest under protection. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels pretty similar. Nicholas studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly, as if coming to a decision. 3 days. What? You want a timeline. I'll give you one. 3 days. Give me 3 days to track down the people responsible and deal with the immediate threat. If after 3 days you still want to leave, I won't stop you. But I'm asking you, as the man whose life you saved, to trust me for 72 hours. It was more reasonable than she'd expected. More than she probably deserved given the situation. But 3 days felt like a lifetime when her entire world had just imploded. I want to be able to move around, Ellie said, negotiating terms she barely understood. I'm not staying locked in that bedroom for 3 days. You'll have full access to the apartment. Ethan or someone from my security team will be here at all times, but they'll stay out of your way unless there's a threat. And I'm not a prisoner? You're not a prisoner. Ellie looked down at her bandaged hand, at the gauze wrapped around her palm. She thought about the red wire under the dashboard, the explosion, the heat, the way Nicholas had covered her body without hesitation, protecting her from debris. He could have let her get blown up, could have ignored her warning and gotten himself killed. Instead, both of them were standing here in this expensive apartment negotiating the terms of her temporary captivity. 3 days, she agreed finally. But if you haven't figured this out by then, I'm leaving. I'll take my chances with the Albanians before I let my entire life fall apart. Something flickered in Nicholas's eyes. Respect, maybe. Or concern. Fair enough. He extended his hand across the counter. Ellie looked at it for a moment before shaking. His grip was firm, warm, the calluses on his palm surprising for someone who wore $1,000 suits. Ethan will show you around, Nicholas said, releasing her hand. There's food in the kitchen, clean clothes in your size in the closet. If you need anything else, just ask. How do you have clothes in my size? A slight smile. I have people who are very good at estimating these things. Of course he did. Nicholas headed toward the door, pulling out his phone. Before he left, he paused and looked back at her. For what it's worth, Miss Wells, I am sorry you got dragged into this. You didn't deserve it. Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click behind him. Ellie stood in the middle of the expensive apartment, surrounded by marble and leather and a view of Central Park that probably cost more per month than she made in a year. Ethan refilled her coffee cup without asking, the sound of espresso pouring the only noise in the sudden silence. 3 days, she muttered to herself. 3 days to wait while dangerous men hunted for solutions to problems she'd created by doing the right thing. She picked up the coffee cup and walked to the windows, staring out at the city below. People went about their normal lives down there, going to work, meeting friends, living freely. Ellie pressed her forehead against the cool glass and wondered if she'd ever feel normal again. 3 days should have been simple. 72 hours of waiting while Nicholas Pellegrini dealt with whatever threats lurked in the shadows of his world. Then Ellie could walk away, return to her life, pretend none of this had happened, except it was morning of the 3rd day, and the tightness in Ethan's jaw when he arrived told her everything she needed to know before he said a word. Ellie had been awake since 6, unable to sleep past dawn, despite the blackout curtains in her temporary bedroom. She'd showered, changed into clothes from the mysteriously well-stocked closet, jeans and a soft gray sweater that fit perfectly. The bandages on her hand had been changed again, the scrapes on her face starting to fade from angry red to dull pink under the fresh gauze Ethan had left for her. She was making coffee when Ethan came through the front door, phone pressed to his ear, his expression darker than she'd seen in the past 2 days. He ended the call and looked at her. "We have a problem." Ellie's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" Ethan pulled out his phone, swiped through something, then turned the screen toward her. It was a grainy photo, clearly pulled from security footage. The angle was from above, showing the entrance of Fiore d'Oro. And there, frozen mid-run, was Ellie. Her face was visible, clear enough to identify even with the poor quality. Below the photo, text in Albanian and English. $50,000. Location only. Alive preferred. The coffee cup slipped from Ellie's fingers. It shattered against the marble floor, dark liquid spreading across white stone. "They leaked it last night," Ethan said quietly, pocketing his phone and grabbing paper towels. "Sent it through their network of informants and associates. By morning, half the criminal underground in New York had seen your face." Ellie couldn't look away from the puddle of coffee spreading at her feet. $50,000. For her, like she was a bounty. A thing to be hunted. Alive preferred. She repeated numbly. "What does that mean?" "It means they want to question you before they kill you," Ethan said bluntly, already cleaning up the mess. "They want to know if you're connected to us, if you know anything useful, if there are other witnesses. Then they'll eliminate you as a loose end." The apartment felt suddenly smaller, the walls pressing in. "You said 3 days. Nicholas said 3 days and I could leave if I wanted. That was before this." Ethan straightened, tossing the coffee-soaked towels into the trash. "I'm sorry, Miss Wells, but walking out that door right now would be suicide. They're looking for you. Actively." Ellie backed up until her spine hit the counter, needing something solid to support her weight. "This isn't fair. I didn't do anything except try to help." "I know. I had a life. I had a plan. I was going to save money, maybe go back to culinary school, open my own place someday." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Now I'm trapped here with a price on my head because I noticed a wire." Ethan's expression softened marginally. "Nicholas is working on it. He's meeting with lawyers right now about delaying your FBI deposition until we can guarantee your safety. And he's putting pressure on Albanian operations, trying to force them to back off. And if they don't back off?" Ethan didn't answer, which was answer enough. The front door opened 20 minutes later. Nicholas walked in wearing a different suit, charcoal with subtle pinstripes. His tie loosened like he'd been pulling at it. He looked tired. Not physically exhausted, but the kind of tired that came from carrying too much weight for too long. His eyes found Ellie immediately, taking in her pale face and rigid posture. "You've heard. $50,000, Ellie said. "Apparently I'm expensive. You're valuable," Nicholas corrected, crossing to the kitchen. "There's a difference. They want you because you're a threat to them. I'm a waitress. Was a waitress." The past tense tasted bitter. "I'm not a threat to anyone. You stopped their operation. You cost them time, money, and credibility. In their world, that makes you dangerous." Ellie laughed, a sharp sound with no humor in it. "This is insane. This entire situation is completely insane." Nicholas poured himself coffee from the pot Ellie hadn't finished making, drinking it black without sugar. He studied her over the rim of the cup, those dark eyes assessing in a way that made her feel simultaneously protected and exposed. "I need to do something," Ellie said suddenly. "I can't just sit here spiraling. My hands need to be busy or I'm going to lose my mind." She moved to the refrigerator before either man could respond, pulling it open and surveying the contents. Someone kept it well stocked. Fresh vegetables, herbs, quality ingredients. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, teaching her that cooking was meditation, that when the world felt chaotic, you could always find peace in the rhythm of chopping, stirring, kneading. "Do you mind if I cook?" The question came out more vulnerable than she intended. Nicholas blinked, surprised. "The kitchen is yours." Ellie started pulling ingredients, moving on autopilot. San Marzano tomatoes, fresh basil, garlic, olive oil that actually smelled like olives, not the cheap garbage from discount stores. Flour and eggs for pasta. Her hands knew what to do even when her mind felt shattered. She worked methodically, finding comfort in familiar motions. Flour piled on the marble counter, shaped into a well. Eggs cracked into the center. Fingers mixing, kneading, the dough coming together under her palms. It took 20 minutes of steady work before her breathing finally slowed to something approaching normal. Nicholas watched from the bar stool, not speaking, just present. Ethan had disappeared into another room, giving them privacy. The pasta dough rested under a clean towel while Ellie started the sauce. Garlic sizzled in olive oil, the smell sharp and grounding. Tomatoes crushed by hand, basil torn roughly. Salt, and a pinch of sugar to balance the acidity. Her grandmother had taught her this sauce when Ellie was 8 years old, standing on a step stool to reach the stove. "My grandmother came from Naples," Ellie said suddenly, not looking up from the pot. 1973. She was 19, spoke maybe 10 words of English, and had $40 in her pocket. She settled in Detroit because she had a cousin there who worked in a car factory. She stirred the sauce slowly, watching it bubble. She met my grandfather at a church social. He was second-generation Italian, family from Sicily. They got married 6 months later and opened a tiny restaurant in a bad neighborhood. 20 tables. No liquor license. Just good food and hard work. Nicholas remained silent, letting her talk. "The place did well enough," Ellie continued. "Not rich, but comfortable. My mom grew up in that restaurant, met my dad there when he came in for dinner one night. Eventually, my grandfather died and my dad inherited the business. He ran it for 15 years. She paused, tasting the sauce, adjusting the seasoning. He was a good man in a lot of ways. Generous, kind. But he had a problem. Gambling. Started small, horses and sports betting. Then it got worse. Cards, underground games, borrowing from the wrong people to chase losses. The pasta dough had rested long enough. Ellie began rolling it out, the motion soothing in its repetition. He lost the restaurant 6 years ago. Couldn't pay the mortgage or the loan sharks. Lost everything my grandmother had built. And he just kept gambling, kept digging deeper. He owed $11,500 when he died 3 years ago. Heart attack. Stress, the doctor said. She cut the pasta into thin strips, hanging them over the back of a chair to dry. We never reconciled. I tried. But he was always ashamed. Couldn't look me in the eye. So he died and I was left with his debts and his mess and no closure. The sauce was done. Ellie turned off the heat and finally looked at Nicholas. "That's why I moved to New York. Fresh start. New city where nobody knew about my family or our failures. I was going to work hard, save money, maybe open my own place someday. Nothing fancy. Just honest food and a chance to rebuild what he destroyed." Nicholas set down his coffee cup carefully. "I know." Ellie froze. "What?" "I had you investigated," he said quietly. "After the explosion. I needed to know who you were, if you were connected to the Albanians somehow, if the timing was coincidence or setup. My people made calls to Detroit, talked to people who knew your family." Anger flared hot in Ellie's chest. "You investigated me? Like I'm some kind of criminal? Like you're someone who saved my life and I needed to understand why." His voice remained calm, steady. "I know about your father. The addiction. The debts. I know you moved here 3 years ago, worked 2 jobs for the first year, that you send money to your mother every month even though you can barely afford it. You had no right." "I had every right," Nicholas interrupted, but not unkindly. "Someone tried to kill me with a car bomb. You stopped them. I don't believe in coincidences. I needed to know everything about you to assess the situation properly." Ellie gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. "And what did your investigation tell you? That I'm a broke waitress with dead-end prospects and daddy issues? It told me you're honest, hardworking. That the debts your father left were small, owed to predatory lenders in Detroit, the kind of local loan sharks who have no connection to organized crime in New York. That you're not a threat or a plant. That you're exactly what you appear to be. Someone who saw danger and chose to act." The confirmation should have made her feel better. Instead, it made her feel exposed, every private detail of her messy life laid bare for his scrutiny. "The debts," Nicholas said carefully. $11,500. "I can resolve them. One phone call, and that burden disappears." "No." The word came out hard, final. "It's a small amount. I don't care if it's 50 cents. Ellie cut him off. "I'm not taking your money. I'm not letting you buy my problems and hold them over my head. That's not what this is. Isn't it? You fix my debts, I owe you a favor. Maybe more than one. Maybe you decide someday you want something from me and I can't say no because I'm in your debt. That's how this works, right? That's how your world operates?" Nicholas's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about my world. Then enlighten me," Ellie challenged. "Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me that powerful men like you do favors out of the goodness of their hearts with no strings attached." They stared at each other across the kitchen, tension thick between them. Finally, Nicholas nodded once. "You're right. In my world, everything has a price. Every favor comes with expectation of return. But that's not what I'm offering you." "What are you offering then?" "A way to eliminate a vulnerability," he said. "Those debts make you a target for pressure. Someone could use them against you. Against me by extension, since you're under my protection. I want them gone for strategic reasons." "Still sounds like strings to me." "Then refuse," Nicholas said simply. "Keep the debts. I'll respect that choice. But know that I'm trying to help, not control you." Ellie held his gaze for a beat too long. Pride and fear wrestled in her chest until fear won. "Fine," she said, the word tasting bitter. "If those debts are a vulnerability, then we end them. But we do it clean, in writing. No favors, no leverage. You pay them, and it's over. Forever." Nicholas's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in assessment. Then he nodded once. "Done. My attorney will draft a one-page waiver. You sign it, I make the call, and you never hear about Detroit again." The front door opened and Ethan returned, carrying a tablet. He glanced between them, reading the tension accurately, but pressed forward. "Boss, you need to see this." Nicholas took the tablet, his expression darkening as he read. "When?" "This morning. Building manager confirmed it was delivered around 7. "What?" Ellie asked, her earlier anger shifting to concern. Nicholas handed her the tablet. On the screen was a photo of a letter, printed on plain white paper in block letters. "We know where she works. Next time we'll know where she lives." The address at the top was for Fiore d'Oro. The letter had been delivered to the restaurant that morning. Ellie's hands shook as she read it again. "They're threatening me. At my old job." "They're making a point," Ethan corrected. "Showing they have reach, that they're watching." Nicholas took the tablet back, his expression carved from stone. "Ethan, increase security rotations. I want someone on this building 24/7, and send someone to Miss Wells's apartment in Queens. If they know where she worked, they'll find her address eventually." "Already done," Ethan confirmed. "I have 2 men stationed outside her building as of an hour ago." Ellie felt the walls closing in again. This is my life now? Looking over my shoulder forever? Wondering if today's the day someone decides $50,000 is worth the risk? "No," Nicholas said firmly. "This is temporary. We're putting pressure on Albanian operations, cutting off their income streams, making it expensive for them to come after you. Eventually, they'll decide you're not worth the cost." "Eventually? You mean weeks? Months? I don't know," he admitted. "But I won't let them hurt you. You have my word on that." His word. Like that meant something. Like promises from a man who lived in a world of violence and consequences actually held weight. Ellie looked at the pasta hanging to dry, at the sauce cooling on the stove. Normal things. Simple things. The kind of things that used to make up her entire world. 3 days, she said quietly. That was the deal. 3 days and I could leave if I wanted. Nicholas's expression didn't change. "Yes, that was the deal. But if I leave now, I'll die. Probably." The bluntness should have made her angry. Instead, it just made her tired. "So I don't really have a choice, do I?" "There's always a choice," Nicholas said. "But some choices have consequences you might not survive." He reached for the wine glass but didn't drink, as if even that small indulgence would be dishonest. "The 72 hours are up," he added, voice low. My word still stands. If you tell me you're done, I won't chain you to my life. Ellie's laugh came out thin. You'll just let me walk out? Not into an open street, alone with people hunting you. Nicholas's gaze didn't waver. But you can choose the shape of your protection. FBI custody. A safe house they control. You give them what you know and you disappear under a badge and a locked door. Or you stay with me, under my security, where I can actually see the threat before it reaches you. Or you leave New York entirely, with help, with a plan, not with a suitcase and a prayer. And if I pick the first one, she asked, then I put you in their hands, and I still do everything I can to keep you alive. He said simply, I don't like it, but it's your decision. The offer didn't feel like freedom. It felt like being asked to choose between different kinds of cages. But at least he was naming them. At least he wasn't pretending. Ellie turned back to the stove, testing the pasta water that had started to boil. She dropped the fresh noodles in, watching them swirl in the rolling water. 2 minutes for fresh pasta. That's all it needed. Simple. Predictable. Unlike everything else in her life right now. I need a job, she said finally. Not your money. Not charity. A real job with a real salary that I earn. Nicholas tilted his head slightly, considering. What kind of job? I'm a trained chef. Well, partially trained. I did 2 years at culinary school before my father died and I had to drop out. She stirred the pasta carefully. I know Italian cuisine. Traditional preparations. My grandmother taught me things you can't learn in school. I own 3 restaurants. Nicholas said slowly. Legitimate businesses. They could use someone with your skills. As what? A consultant? An employee? Culinary operations manager, he offered. You'd oversee the kitchens, work with the chefs on menus, ensure quality and authenticity. It's a real position with real responsibilities. $4,500 a month salary. Ellie drained the pasta, the steam rising in clouds that blurred her vision. $4,500 a month. More than she'd made as a waitress. More than she'd ever made, honestly. And when the Albanian situation resolves, she asked, do I keep the job or does it disappear? You keep it as long as you want it. Contract terms, legal and binding. She plated the pasta, topped it with sauce, fresh basil torn over the top. She slid 1 plate toward Nicholas, kept one for herself. He picked up a fork, tried a bite. His eyebrows rose slightly. This is exceptional. My grandmother's recipe. Ellie took her own bite. The familiar flavors a small comfort. So, real job, real salary, real contract? All of it. She ate slowly, thinking through every angle. This was still his world, his terms, his control. But it was better than hiding indefinitely with no income. Better than letting her entire life collapse while she waited for danger to pass. I accept, she said finally. But I want the contract in writing. Professional terms. And if I want to quit, I can. Agreed. They ate in silence for a while. The good kind of silence that didn't need filling. When Ethan returned to the kitchen, Nicholas slid the second plate toward him. Try this. Ethan took a bite and nodded appreciatively. You should hire her for real. I just did, Nicholas said, a slight smile on his face. Ellie looked between them, reality settling over her like a weight. She had a job, security, protection, everything she needed to survive this nightmare. All it cost was her freedom and her peace of mind. She finished her pasta and started cleaning up, her hands busy again, her mind already planning menus and recipes. If she was going to do this, she'd do it right. Build something real from the ashes of her interrupted life. Outside the windows, the city continued on. People lived and worked and moved freely through streets she couldn't walk without risk. But in this expensive apartment with these dangerous men, Ellie Wells was safe. For now, that would have to be sufficient. 2.5 weeks working for Nicholas Pellegrini taught Ellie that legitimate business could be just as demanding as the criminal kind. Maybe more so, since it required maintaining appearances. The first Friday, she asked for a secure phone call and told her mother, careful, casual lies, that she'd picked up extra shifts and couldn't talk long. She sent the usual money anyway. watching the transfer confirmation appear on the screen with a relief so sharp it almost hurt. Whatever else had been stolen from her, that responsibility stayed. 2 days after she signed Nicholas's waiver, Ethan confirmed the Detroit debts were gone. No threats. No follow-up. Just silence where a noose had been. And the FBI didn't forget her either. A week into her new routine, she sat in a quiet conference room with 2 agents and Nicholas's attorney, gave a recorded statement until her throat went raw, then left with a card that promised a scheduled deposition later, when later wouldn't get her killed. She stood in the kitchen of Casa Bianca, the second of 3 restaurants Nicholas owned in Manhattan, watching the head chef prepare osso buco with techniques that would have made her grandmother weep. The saffron risotto beside it looked acceptable, but the bone marrow hadn't been properly roasted before braising. "The marrow needs to render slowly," Ellie said, keeping her tone professional rather than critical. "If you braise it too quickly, it turns gelatinous instead of silky. Try roasting the bones at 350 for 20 minutes before you add them to the braising liquid." The chef, a man in his 50s named Antonio, who'd initially resented taking direction from someone half his age, nodded thoughtfully. "Like my mother used to do. I forgot that step when I modernized the recipe. Sometimes the old ways work because they actually work," Ellie said. "Not because of tradition, but because the technique is sound." Nicholas leaned against the stainless steel prep counter near the door, watching the exchange with apparent amusement. He'd been accompanying her to these restaurant visits more frequently than necessary. As owner, he could have sent someone else to supervise, could have reviewed her reports remotely. Instead, he showed up personally, asked questions, listened to her explain techniques and ingredient sourcing with genuine interest. Today he wore dark slacks and a black sweater instead of his usual suit, slightly more casual but no less expensive. The scrape on her cheek had finally healed completely, leaving no scar. The bandages on her hand were gone, though the skin remained slightly pink, where the worst abrasions had been. They finished the kitchen inspection and moved to the dining room. Casa Bianca wouldn't open for another 3 hours, the space empty and quiet. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating dust motes floating in the air. The tables were already set for evening service, white linens crisp and perfect. "Your thoughts?" Nicholas asked, pulling out a chair at a corner table. Ellie sat across from him, flipping through notes on the tablet Ethan had provided her. "The kitchen staff is skilled but inconsistent. Antonio knows classic techniques, but he's been taking shortcuts. The seasonal menu needs updating. Nobody's using autumn vegetables properly. And your wine list is overpriced for what you're offering." "Overpriced how?" "You're charging Manhattan steakhouse prices for wines that should cost 30% less. It's not about the quality. It's about market positioning. You're an Italian restaurant, not a status symbol. People come here for authenticity, not to show off." Nicholas smiled, a real one that reached his eyes. "You're not afraid to be honest. You hired me to improve your restaurants, not to tell you what you want to hear." Ellie set down the tablet. "If you just wanted compliments, you could have hired someone cheaper." "True." He leaned back in his chair, studying her in that assessing way he had. "You've been doing good work these past weeks. The kitchen at Nonna's is running smoother since you reorganized their prep schedule. And the menu changes at Stella increased their weeknight traffic by 18%. "I saw the numbers," Ellie admitted. "It's satisfying, seeing real results from actual work. As opposed to standing around waiting for danger to pass." She met his gaze directly. "I know I'm still under protection. I know there are men watching my old apartment and following me when I leave the Upper East Side. But at least now I'm doing something productive instead of just hiding." "You were never just hiding, wasn't I?" Ellie's voice carried an edge. "Trapped in a gilded cage, waiting for you to solve my problems? Is that what you think this is?" Nicholas leaned forward, his expression sharpening. "A cage? I don't know what this is," Ellie said honestly. "Some days it feels like protection. Some days it feels like control. I can't tell the difference anymore." Before Nicholas could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting immediately. Whatever ease had been in his posture disappeared, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. "Excuse me," he said, standing and moving to the far side of the dining room. Ellie watched him take the call. noting the tension in his shoulders, the sharp edge to his voice even though she couldn't hear the words. Something was wrong. She'd learned to read the small tells over the past weeks. The way his jaw tightened when receiving bad news. The slight narrowing of his eyes when calculating responses. He ended the call and returned to the table. But he didn't sit down. "We need to go." "What happened?" "I'll explain in the car." They rode in tense silence. Nicholas on his phone issuing clipped instructions to people whose names Ellie didn't recognize. The driver navigated through Manhattan traffic with practiced efficiency. Ethan sat in the front passenger seat, also on his phone, his voice low and urgent. When they finally returned to the Upper East Side apartment, Nicholas immediately headed for his office. Ellie followed, ignoring the subtle attempt to exclude her. "What's going on?" she demanded from the doorway. Nicholas looked up from where he'd been pulling files from a locked cabinet. For a moment, she thought he'd tell her to leave, to let him handle his business. Instead, he gestured for her to sit. "We've been putting pressure on Albanian operations for weeks now," he said, organizing papers on his desk. "Cutting off their supply lines, interfering with their protection rackets, making it expensive for them to operate in territories they tried to claim. It's been working. They've lost revenue, lost face with other organizations. They were starting to pull back." "Were?" "They just escalated." Nicholas's voice remained controlled, but there was fury beneath it. "An hour ago they hit one of my warehouses at the Brooklyn port. Arson. Professional job with accelerants. 3 of my men were injured getting everyone else out before the building went up." Ellie's breath caught. "Are they okay?" "The injured men? Burns. Smoke inhalation. They'll recover." He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. Flames consuming a large industrial building, black smoke billowing into the sky. "The warehouse is gone. Complete loss. I'm sorry." "I don't need sympathy," Nicholas said sharply, then seemed to catch himself. "I need to go handle this. Make sure my people are taken care of. Send the right message about what happens when the Albanians cross certain lines." Ellie stood. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." "Nicholas." "No," he said firmly. "This isn't negotiable. This is an active situation. There could still be Albanians in the area. It's not safe." "Nowhere is safe," Ellie countered. "Not really. You said so yourself. They have my photo. They're looking for me. Whether I'm here or there, I'm a target. Here, you're a protected target." Nicholas moved around the desk toward her. "There, you're exposed. I won't risk that. You won't risk it, or you won't give me the choice." His eyes flashed with something dangerous. "Both. This is my world, my responsibility. I'm not bringing you into a war zone because you're feeling restless." The words stung more than they should have. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Ellie struggled to articulate the feeling that had been building for weeks. "I'm tired of being a passive participant in my own life. Things happen to me. Decisions get made for me. I get protected and managed and told what's safe. But I don't get to choose anything." Nicholas's expression softened marginally. "I understand that frustration. But this particular choice could get you killed. And I can't allow that." "Can't allow," Ellie repeated. "Because you're in charge and I'm just the waitress you saved. Because you saved my life first," Nicholas said quietly. "And I will not let that act of courage be repaid with your death. I won't let them take you from this world because of choices I made, wars I started before you even knew my name." The raw honesty in his voice stopped Ellie's argument cold. She'd seen him angry, seen him calculating, seen him giving orders with absolute authority. But this was different. This was personal. "I need to go," Nicholas said after a moment. "Ethan will stay here with you. 2 guards will be outside. You'll be safe." Ellie wanted to argue more, but she could see it would be futile. "Be careful." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, that she cared about his safety. "I will." He left with 4 men, all of them armed, moving with military precision. The apartment felt enormous and empty once they were gone. Ethan settled into the living room with his laptop, monitoring whatever needed monitoring. Ellie paced for 20 minutes before giving up and retreating to the kitchen. She needed her hands busy, needed to create something to offset the destruction happening across the city. She made bread. Kneading dough required physical effort that matched her emotional state. Push and fold, working out frustration with every motion. The yeast smell was comforting, familiar, grounding her when everything else felt chaotic. Hours passed. The bread baked, filling the apartment with warmth and the smell of home. Ellie made soup to go with it, a simple minestrone with vegetables and beans. Comfort food for a day that had stripped away any remaining illusions of normalcy. It was past 9 when the front door finally opened. Nicholas walked in, looking like he'd been to war. His clothes were covered in black soot, his face streaked with ash and sweat. The controlled fury from earlier had been replaced by something colder, more dangerous. Ethan stood immediately. Report? Fire's out. Men are at the hospital, stable condition. Building's a total loss, but insurance will cover most of it. Nicholas pulled off his jacket, tossing it over a chair. We need to talk. Something in his tone made Ellie's stomach tighten with dread. What happened? Nicholas pulled out his phone, swiped through photos, then handed it to her. The screen showed a wall of the burned warehouse. Despite the fire damage, the message was clear, spray painted in red across the blackened bricks. The waitress can't hide forever. Below the words, stenciled with disturbing precision, was her face. The same photo from the bounty notice, but larger, more prominent. Someone had taken the time during or after the arson to leave this specific message. Ellie's hands shook as she stared at her own image on that ruined wall. They'd known the warehouse would burn, had planned for it, and still took the time to deliver this threat. They're escalating, Nicholas said quietly, taking the phone back. This wasn't just about damaging my property or hurting my people. This was about sending you a message, about making it personal. Ellie sank onto the couch, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. I thought you said the pressure was working, that they were backing off. I was wrong. The admission clearly cost him. They're not interested in backing off. They're interested in revenge, and you're the symbol of their failure. As long as you're alive, you're proof that they're not invincible. So what does that mean? Ellie looked up at him. What happens now? Nicholas sat beside her, close enough that she could smell the smoke clinging to his clothes. It means this isn't temporary anymore. This is permanent until we force a permanent resolution. They won't stop coming for you. Not in weeks or months. Not until one side wins. The words settled over her like a shroud. No more pretending this would blow over. No more counting down days until freedom. This was her life now. Running, hiding, looking over her shoulder, living under constant threat. I understand if you're angry, Nicholas continued. If you want to blame me for dragging you into this. But I need you to understand something. He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense. I will not let them hurt you. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, I will keep you safe. That's not negotiable. Even if it means more violence? Ellie's voice came out smaller than she intended. Even if it means people dying? Yes. The simple honesty should have horrified her. Maybe it would have 3 weeks ago when she was just a waitress worried about rent and tips. But she'd learned too much about his world since then. Understood that in certain circles, protection required strength, and strength sometimes required violence. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. You should be, Nicholas said. Fear keeps you careful, keeps you alive. But you're not alone in this. You have me. You have Ethan and my entire organization working to eliminate this threat. We will find a way to end this. Ellie looked at her own face on his phone screen, spray-painted on a burned warehouse wall like a target. How? How do you end something like this? By making it more expensive for them to continue than to walk away, Nicholas explained. We've been cutting their income. Now we cut deeper. We go after their leadership, their operations, their reputation. We make them understand that coming after you costs more than your life is worth to them. It was cold, calculated, utterly pragmatic. And Ellie realized with disturbing clarity that she didn't have better options. I don't want people hurt because of me, she said. People are already hurt. 3 of my men tonight. That's on the Albanians, not you. Nicholas's jaw tightened. You didn't start this war. You just happened to be standing in the right place at the right time to save my life. Everything that's followed is consequence of their actions, not yours. Ellie wanted to believe that. Wanted to absolve herself of responsibility for the violence spiraling out from one moment of instinct. But she couldn't quite manage it. Come on. Nicholas stood, offering his hand. You made bread. I can smell it. And I haven't eaten since morning. The abrupt shift to normalcy felt jarring, but Ellie took his hand and let him pull her up. They moved to the kitchen where the bread sat cooling on the counter beside the pot of soup. She served them both in silence. The domestic ritual strange against the backdrop of arson and threats. Nicholas ate methodically, clearly hungry despite the chaos of his day. This is excellent, he said after the third spoonful. My grandmother's recipe, Ellie replied automatically. They ate without talking more, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just two people sharing a meal after an exhausting day, finding small comfort in simple things. When Nicholas finally left to shower off the smoke and soot, Ellie remained in the kitchen, cleaning up slowly. Through the windows, Manhattan glittered with a million lights. Somewhere out there, people were searching for her. Planning. Plotting. Waiting for an opportunity. But in this moment, in this expensive apartment with dangerous men protecting her, Ellie was alive. She was safe. And tomorrow, she'd continue building something real from the wreckage of her interrupted life. It wasn't the future she'd imagined 3 weeks ago, but it was the one she had now, and she'd learned that survival meant adapting, not clinging to what used to be. The call came at 6 a.m, dragging Ellie from restless sleep. She heard Nicholas's voice through the walls, sharp and controlled, issuing orders with the clipped precision that meant something had gone very wrong. By the time she dressed and emerged from her bedroom, the apartment was already filling with men in dark suits, all of them moving with urgent purpose. Ethan met her in the hallway. Conference today. Nicholas wants you there. Why? What happened? Leak in the organization. Ethan said grimly. We found the source. Now we need to deal with it. 2 hours later, Ellie found herself in a part of Nicholas's world she'd never seen before. They'd driven to a nondescript office building in Midtown, taken a private elevator to the top floor, and entered what could only be described as a fortress. The conference room was windowless, with walls that looked reinforced, and a door that sealed with an audible click when Ethan closed it behind them. Nicholas stood at the head of a long table, still wearing the suit from yesterday, looking like he hadn't slept. 6 men occupied chairs around the table, all of them older than Nicholas by a decade or more. These were his senior associates, Ellie realized. The inner circle. Men who'd probably been in this life longer than she'd been alive. Sit there. Nicholas indicated a chair against the wall, away from the table. You need to hear this. Ellie sat, acutely aware of being the only woman in a room full of dangerous men. They all looked at her with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion, but none of them questioned her presence. If Nicholas wanted her here, she was here. Gentlemen, Nicholas began, his voice carrying absolute authority despite the exhaustion in his eyes. We have a problem. For the past 3 months, the Albanians have been operating with intelligence they shouldn't have. They knew about the warehouse shipment schedule. They knew which properties we use for storage. They knew Miss Wells was under protection here. That level of detail doesn't come from surveillance or lucky guessing. It comes from inside. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The 6 men exchanged glances, wariness replacing their earlier casual postures. I want to be very clear, Nicholas continued, his dark eyes moving from face to face. I'm not accusing anyone at this table. You're here because you're the only people I still trust completely. But someone with access to operational information has been feeding it to our enemies. Someone close enough to know schedules, locations, financial movements. And we're going to identify them today. One of the older men, gray-haired with a scar running through his left eyebrow, leaned forward. Nicholas, we've worked together for 20 years. If there's a rat, I'll help you find him and deal with him personally. I appreciate that, Vincent. Nicholas nodded. Which is why I'm going to ask each of you direct questions about your movements and communications over the past 3 months. This isn't an interrogation. It's elimination. We clear everyone in this room, then we expand the search. For the next hour, Ellie watched Nicholas methodically question each man. Where were you on specific dates? Who have you spoken with outside the organization? Have you noticed any unusual behavior from other associates? The questions were detailed, specific, delivered with calm precision that made clear there was no room for evasion. The men answered honestly, or at least appeared to. They provided alibis, explained meetings, offered information freely. Nicholas took notes, occasionally conferring quietly with Ethan, who sat beside him with a laptop open. Finally, Nicholas looked up from his notes. Thank you all. That gives us what we need to narrow the search. Ethan, show them. Ethan turned the laptop around so the screen faced the table. We've been conducting digital forensics for the past week. Quietly, without alerting anyone outside this room. What we found was a pattern of unauthorized transfers from one of our secondary operational accounts. Small amounts at first, $3,000 to $5,000, then larger. Over 3 months, approximately $47,000 moved to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. He clicked through several screens, showing banking records, timestamps, IP addresses. We also found encrypted emails sent from a computer with access to our secure network. The encryption was good, but not good enough. Our tech people traced the destination server to Queens, specifically to a location we've identified as an Albanian communication hub. Vincent's face darkened. Who? Nicholas's expression could have been carved from stone. Carlo Grimaldiro. The name hit the room like a physical blow. Several of the men reacted with visible shock. One swore viciously in Italian. Another just shook his head in apparent disbelief. Carlo? Vincent sounded genuinely stunned. He's been with us for 8 years. He handles all the legitimate business finances. Jesus, Nicholas, he knows everything about the legal operations. Exactly, Nicholas said coldly, which made him the perfect source for the Albanians. He had access to property records, transport schedules, investment portfolios. He knew which buildings we owned, which we rented, which we used for storage. And he's been selling that information for 3 months. Ethan pulled up more documents. We found the motivation. Carlo has a gambling problem, started small poker games in Atlantic City, but he got deeper into it, higher stakes underground games. He accumulated $180,000 in debts to a casino that's controlled by Albanian interests. They offered him a deal. Feed them information, and the debt disappears. Where is he now? Another man asked. Being collected. Nicholas replied. He should arrive within the hour. I wanted to brief all of you first. Make sure everyone understood the scope of the betrayal before we confronted him directly. The conference room door opened and 2 men entered, escorting a third between them. Carlo Grimaldiro was in his mid-50s, balding, with the soft build of someone who spent their days behind a desk. He looked terrified, his face pale and sweating despite the cool air conditioning. The escorts pushed him into a chair at the far end of the table. Carlo's eyes darted around the room, taking in the assembled men, landing finally on Nicholas with something that looked like desperate hope. Nicholas, there's been a mistake, Carlo started, his voice shaking. Whatever you think I did, you stole $47,000 from operational funds. Nicholas interrupted, his tone flat and emotionless. You sent encrypted emails containing proprietary information about our properties and operations to Albanian contacts. You've been doing this for 3 months. These aren't accusations, Carlo. These are facts backed by digital evidence that will hold up in any court, criminal or otherwise. Carlo's face crumpled. I can explain. They forced me. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Nicholas said coldly. You chose to gamble money you didn't have. You chose to continue gambling when you knew you were drowning in debt. You chose to accept their offer instead of coming to me for help. Every step of this was your choice. $180,000, Carlo said desperately. How was I supposed to ask you for that kind of money? You would have wanted to know why, and I couldn't tell you about the gambling. You would have lost trust in me. I lost trust in you the moment you sold information about my operations to my enemies. Nicholas replied. The gambling, I might have helped with, might have gotten you into treatment, arranged a payment plan, something, but you went to the Albanians instead. You gave them details about warehouse schedules. You told them which properties we use and when. You endangered everyone in this organization, including an innocent woman who has nothing to do with our world. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. That warehouse fire? 3 men were injured because the Albanians knew exactly when and where to hit us. They knew because you told them. You're not just a thief, Carlo. You're responsible for putting my people in the hospital. Carlo was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I never gave them information about people, I swear, just numbers, financial records, property addresses. I made sure it was only logistics, nothing that would get anyone hurt. You think logistics and violence are separate? Vincent spat from across the table. You think they wanted property addresses so they could send Christmas cards? They used your information to plan attacks, to target our operations, to threaten Miss Wells specifically. You enabled all of it. Ellie had been silent throughout the confrontation, sitting against the wall and observing. Now she understood why Nicholas had wanted her here. This wasn't just about betrayal within his organization. This was about her. The information Carlo had sold had directly contributed to the Albanians' ability to target her, to know where she was being protected, to escalate their threats with precision. What did you tell them about Miss Wells? Nicholas asked, his voice deadly quiet. Carlo shook his head frantically. Nothing, I swear. I didn't even know who she was until I saw the news about the car bomb. They never asked about specific people, just locations and schedules. But you knew we were using the Upper East Side property for protection? Carlo hesitated, then nodded miserably. They asked which properties weren't used for business. I told them about the residential places. I didn't know why they wanted to know. I thought maybe they were looking for targets to hit when no one was there. Jesus Christ, Ethan muttered. Nicholas remained perfectly still, but Ellie could see the fury radiating from him in waves. 8 years. I trusted you with my legitimate business finances. I let you see records that could destroy us if they fell into the wrong hands. I invited you to family dinners, and you repaid that trust by selling me out for gambling debts. I'm sorry, Carlo sobbed. I'm so sorry. I'll give back the money. I'll testify against the Albanians. Whatever you want, I'll do it. Just please, please don't what? Nicholas leaned forward. Don't kill you? Is that what you think this is? Carlo couldn't answer, just continued crying. Nicholas stood, buttoning his suit jacket with precise movements. You're removed from all positions effective immediately. Every access you had to our systems is revoked as of this moment. The $47,000 you stole will be repaid with interest, or we'll seize assets until the debt is satisfied. You will have no further contact with anyone in this organization. If you speak to the Albanians again, if you breathe a word about our operations to anyone, you'll discover that there are consequences far worse than death. He turned to the 2 men who'd brought Carlo in. Get him out of here. Make sure he understands that his cooperation in this matter is the only reason he's walking out alive. They hauled Carlo up and dragged him toward the door. He tried to say something else, but one of the escorts silenced him with a hand on his shoulder. The door closed behind them with a hollow thud. Silence filled the conference room. The 6 senior associates sat processing what they'd witnessed. Vincent was the first to speak. You were merciful. More merciful than he deserved. Mercy has nothing to do with it, Nicholas replied tiredly. Killing him would have been easy, but it would also make him a martyr to his family, create complications we don't need. This way, he lives with his shame, and if he's smart, he disappears somewhere far from New York and never comes back. The meeting broke up after Nicholas assigned various tasks to the assembled men. Increased security, review of anyone else who might have access to sensitive information, messages to be sent to Albanian leadership making clear that the leak had been identified and closed. As the room emptied, Ellie remained in her chair against the wall. Nicholas stood at the window that wasn't really a window, just a screen displaying a view of the city, providing the illusion of openness in the sealed room. You should go with Ethan, he said without turning around. I have more meetings today. Are you okay? The question came out before Ellie could stop it. Nicholas's shoulders tensed. I'm fine. You're not. Ellie stood, moving closer but maintaining distance. That man worked for you for 8 years. You trusted him, and he betrayed you. That's not nothing. In this life, betrayal is always a possibility, Nicholas said, still not looking at her. You learn to expect it. Expecting it doesn't make it hurt less. Finally, he turned to face her. His expression was controlled, but she could see the exhaustion and something deeper underneath. Pain, maybe. Or disappointment in himself for not seeing the betrayal sooner. "It's my fault," he said quietly. "I should have noticed. Should have seen signs. Carlo's been distant for months, stressed. I attributed it to the pressure of managing 3 restaurants' finances. I didn't dig deeper. You're not responsible for his choices. I'm responsible for everyone in this organization. Their safety, their loyalty. When someone betrays that, it reflects on my leadership, on my judgment." Nicholas ran a hand through his hair, the first crack in his composure. 3 men were burned in that warehouse fire. They're in the hospital right now because I didn't catch Carlo's betrayal fast enough to prevent the attack. That's on me. Ellie didn't know what to say. She couldn't offer empty reassurances or platitudes. This was his world, his responsibility, his burden. All she could offer was presence, understanding without judgment. "I need to work," Nicholas said after a moment. "There's a lot to handle today." "I'll go with Ethan," Ellie agreed. But she paused at the door. "For what it's worth, you handled that situation with more restraint than most people would have. Carlo's alive because you chose mercy over revenge. That says something about the kind of man you are." She left before he could respond, following Ethan down the hallway to the elevator. They rode back to the Upper East Side in silence, both processing the morning's events. The apartment felt strangely empty when they arrived. Ethan disappeared into his usual spot with his laptop, monitoring communications and security feeds. Ellie made lunch neither of them really wanted, just needing the familiar rhythm of cooking to settle her mind. The afternoon stretched long and quiet. Nicholas didn't return. Ellie worked on restaurant reports, reviewed menus, but her mind kept drifting back to the conference room, to Carlo's tears and Nicholas's cold fury, to the weight of betrayal and the price of misplaced trust. It was past 11 when she finally heard the front door open. Nicholas entered alone, having dismissed his usual security escort downstairs. He looked utterly drained, moving with the careful precision of someone operating on willpower alone. Ellie was in the kitchen, unable to sleep, making tea she didn't particularly want. She watched him head toward his office without acknowledging her presence. She should let him be, should respect his space and his process. But something pulled her forward, following him down the hall to the office door he'd left slightly ajar. Inside, Nicholas sat in the dark, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at nothing. He didn't react when Ellie entered. Didn't tell her to leave. Just sat there in the shadows, lost in thoughts she couldn't access. Ellie settled into the chair across from his desk and waited. She didn't speak, didn't offer comfort or advice or any of the useless things people said when they didn't understand what someone was going through. She just sat with him in the darkness, sharing the silence. "I knew his children," Nicholas said finally, his voice rough. "Carlo's kids. They're grown now, have families of their own. But when they were young, I went to birthday parties, school graduations. I was part of their lives because Carlo was part of mine. I'm sorry. I trusted him completely. Never questioned his loyalty or his competence. Never thought to look deeper when he started showing signs of stress." Nicholas took a drink, the whiskey catching the ambient light from the hallway. "And now, I have to live with the fact that my blindness put people at risk. Put you at risk." Ellie leaned forward. "Carlo made his choices, not you. He could have asked for help with his gambling problem. He could have come clean before it got out of control. He chose the Albanians instead. That's not your fault. Part of leadership is seeing these things before they become catastrophic. You're not psychic. You can't read minds or predict every possible betrayal." She paused, choosing words carefully. "You did what needed to be done today. You protected your organization and removed a threat. That's what good leaders do." Nicholas finally looked at her. Really looked at her, his dark eyes catching hers across the desk. "You shouldn't be here. You should be angry with me for dragging you into this mess." "I'm not angry." "Why not?" He sounded genuinely curious. "Your life was destroyed because of me. Because the Albanians want revenge for my continued existence. You should hate me. I saved your life," Ellie reminded him. "That was my choice. Everything that followed was consequence, yes. but not consequence I regret. These past weeks, working with your restaurants, building something real, it's more than I had before. More purpose, more challenge, more of a future than washing dishes and counting tips. That's rationalization. Maybe, she admitted, or maybe it's just the truth. I can't change what happened. I can only decide how I respond to it. And I'm choosing to see opportunity instead of catastrophe. Nicholas set down his glass and stood, moving around the desk until he was closer to her. In the dim light, his features were all sharp angles and shadows, intimidating and vulnerable at the same time. I care about you, he said quietly. More than I should, more than is wise given everything happening. But I need you to know that. Need you to understand that protecting you isn't just obligation anymore. It's personal. Ellie's breath caught. She'd sensed the shift in him over the past weeks. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention. The way he found excuses to accompany her to restaurant inspections, to share meals, to exist in her space. But hearing him say it aloud made it real in a way that felt both terrifying and inevitable. I care about you too, she admitted. I probably shouldn't. You're a criminal. Your world is violence and consequences I don't fully understand. But I do. I care. Nicholas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone where the scrape had finally healed completely. This is a terrible idea, he said softly. Probably the worst. Ellie agreed. He kissed her then, carefully at first. Testing. She leaned into it, her hands finding his shoulders, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, weeks of tension and unspoken feelings finally finding expression. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Nicholas rested his forehead against hers. We can't undo this, he said quietly. Once we cross this line, everything changes. Everything already changed, Ellie replied. 3 weeks ago when a car exploded. This is just another change in a series of them. He kissed her again, less carefully this time, and Ellie let herself fall into it. Tomorrow would bring more complications, more dangers, more impossible choices. But tonight, in the darkness of his office with the city sleeping outside, they found something simple and true in the chaos of their tangled lives. The maps spread across the dining table looked tactical, military-grade precise. Ellie had come out of her bedroom at 7 a.m, drawn by voices, and found Ethan and Nicholas hunched over detailed schematics of what appeared to be an industrial complex. Red marks indicated entry points. Blue showed potential exit routes. Black X's marked positions she didn't want to think about too carefully. What is this? She asked from the doorway. Both men looked up. Ethan's expression became carefully neutral. Nicholas straightened, rolling his shoulders like they'd been bent over the maps for hours. We found them, Nicholas said simply. Carlo gave us enough information to triangulate their main operations center. Warehouse complex in Queens, industrial area, mostly abandoned buildings. They've been using it as a base for the past 6 months. Ellie moved closer, looking at the map spread across expensive wood. And you're planning to attack it? Yes. The blunt honesty shouldn't have surprised her anymore. Nicholas didn't deal in comfortable lies. When? Dawn tomorrow. We're coordinating with 2 other families who've been hit by Albanian expansion. Combined force of 20 men. Professional controlled operation. He pointed to different sections of the map. 3 entry points. Ethan commands 8 men here, covering the south exits. I take 12 through the main entrance. The Ricci family sends spotters to prevent civilian casualties if anyone wanders into the area. Ellie's stomach tightened. She'd known violence was part of his world, had witnessed the aftermath with the warehouse fire. But this was different. This was premeditated, planned, strategic warfare happening in her city while regular people slept. People are going to die, she said quietly. Probably. Nicholas met her gaze directly. Albanian combatants who've been trying to kill me, who've been threatening you, who've attacked my operations and injured my people. Yes, some of them will likely die tomorrow. And you're okay with that? I'm necessary with it, he corrected. There's a difference. I don't enjoy violence, Ellie. I don't take pleasure in it. But I'm willing to use it when other options have been exhausted. We've tried economic pressure. We've tried negotiation through intermediaries. They responded by escalating, by making this personal with that message at the warehouse. They're not interested in backing down, so we force the issue. Ellie circled the table, looking at the maps from different angles. What about police? FBI? Why not just give them this information and let them handle it? Because federal investigations take months. Because Albanian leadership would scatter before warrants were issued. Because by the time the system worked, if it worked at all, they'd have relocated and reformed elsewhere. Nicholas's voice remained calm, factual, and because this isn't about justice in a legal sense. This is about power, about sending a message that coming after us, after you specifically, costs more than they're willing to pay. So it's revenge. It's consequence, Nicholas said firmly. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional, disproportionate. Consequence is measured, strategic. We're not going there to murder everyone we find. We're going to capture their leadership, specifically Arben Krasniki, and force terms. Make him understand that continued hostility means total war with multiple families, which he cannot win. Ethan cleared his throat softly. Boss, we should review the timeline. Give us a minute. Nicholas interrupted, still watching Ellie. Ethan nodded and retreated to the kitchen, giving them space. Nicholas came around the table to stand closer to her. I know this isn't your world. I know it seems brutal and wrong by the rules you grew up with. But it's the reality of the situation we're in. The Albanians won't stop because we ask nicely. They won't stop because it's the right thing to do. They'll stop when continuing becomes too expensive, when they understand that their survival depends on leaving us alone. And the people in that warehouse? Ellie gestured at the maps. The ones who aren't leadership? The guys just following orders? They'll have opportunity to surrender, Nicholas said. This isn't a massacre. It's a targeted operation. We want Arben alive. We want his lieutenants alive if possible. Anyone who drops their weapon and steps back walks away. But anyone who fights back will be met with appropriate force. Appropriate force. Such clinical language for violence and death. Ellie looked at the maps again, at the careful planning that had gone into this operation. She thought about the past weeks, about the bounty on her head, about seeing her face spray-painted on a burned warehouse wall, about living in constant fear, constantly looking over her shoulder. Her entire life collapsed because she'd noticed a red wire. I don't want innocent people hurt, she said finally. Neither do I. That's why we're doing this at dawn, when the area is empty. That's why we have spotters to keep civilians away. That's why the plan is capture and negotiate, not indiscriminate violence. But if they fight back, then we defend ourselves with lethal force if necessary. Nicholas didn't flinch from the truth. I won't ask my people to die to protect men who are actively trying to kill them. That's not reasonable or realistic. Ellie crossed her arms, feeling cold despite the warm apartment. I hate that this is happening. I hate that it's necessary. I hate that I understand why you're doing it. You can hate it and still accept it, Nicholas said quietly. The two aren't mutually exclusive. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I still hate most of it. But I do what needs to be done to protect my family, my people, and now you. She looked up at him, at the exhaustion in his eyes, at the weight he carried so carefully. Be careful tomorrow. Come back. Something softened in his expression. I will. I have reasons to come back now. He kissed her forehead gently, then returned to the maps with Ethan. Ellie watched them plan for another hour before retreating to her room, unable to witness more. She didn't sleep that night, just lay in bed counting seconds, waiting for dawn. The apartment was empty when she emerged at 7. Nicholas and Ethan had left hours earlier, taking most of the security detail with them. Only one guard remained, stationed outside the front door. Ellie made coffee and waited, every minute stretching into eternity. The call came at 9:15. Ethan's voice, terse and professional. It's done. We're heading back. Boss is fine. Ellie's legs nearly gave out with relief. She sank onto the couch, phone pressed to her ear. What happened? Full debrief when we get there. 30 minutes. He ended the call. Those 30 minutes were the longest of Ellie's life. She paced the apartment, unable to sit still, replaying every terrible possibility. When the front door finally opened, Nicholas walked in followed by Ethan and 3 other men, all of them looking like they'd been through hell. Nicholas's suit jacket was gone. His white shirt had blood on the left sleeve, torn fabric revealing a bandage underneath. His face was smudged with dirt and what might have been gunpowder residue. But he was walking, talking, alive. "You're hurt," Ellie said, already moving toward him. "Graze. Bullet caught the outside of my arm." Ethan field dressed it. "I'm fine." Nicholas caught her hands before she could touch the wound. "It looks worse than it is." "Sit down. Let me see it properly." He didn't argue, just settled onto the couch while Ellie retrieved the first aid kit Ethan kept stocked. She carefully cut away the field bandage, revealing a long, shallow wound along his bicep. The bullet had torn skin and muscle but missed anything vital. It had been cleaned and dressed competently, but she redid it anyway, needing to do something useful with her shaking hands. "Tell me what happened," she said while working. Nicholas winced slightly as she applied fresh antiseptic. "We went in at dawn as planned. Initial entry was smooth, minimal resistance at the perimeter. Most of their force was concentrated inside the main building. We cleared the outer structures first, gave everyone opportunity to surrender. About half did. The others retreated to defend the central office where Arbin was coordinating." He paused while she wrapped fresh gauze around his arm. "The fighting was intense for about 40 minutes. Close quarters, limited sightlines. Ethan's team secured the south exits, prevented anyone from escaping that way. My team pushed through the main corridor. Eventually we cornered Arbin and his top 3 lieutenants in the office. Standoff for 10 minutes while we negotiated terms. He surrendered. He saw reason," Nicholas said dryly. "Representatives from the Vitale and Ricci families were there as witnesses. We made it clear this wasn't just about me. This was 3 Italian families united against Albanian expansion. Fight us all and lose everything or accept terms and walk away intact. Arbin's not stupid. He was outnumbered 3-1 with no escape route and no reinforcements coming. He accepted terms." Ellie finished securing the bandage and sat back. "What terms?" "Complete withdrawal from Manhattan and Bronx territories. No operations, no claims, no presence. They return to their established areas in Queens and stay there. In exchange, we don't pursue further action against their organization." Nicholas flexed his arm carefully, testing the bandage. "And most importantly for you, the threat against you ends immediately and permanently. That was non-negotiable. I made it very clear that if anything happens to you, the agreement is void and total war begins with Arbin being the first target." He agreed to that. He had a gun pointed at his head, and 3 family representatives explaining exactly what would happen if he refused. "Yes," he agreed. Nicholas pulled her closer with his good arm. "It's over, Ellie. The war, the threats, the bounty. You're safe now." The words should have brought immediate relief. Instead, Ellie felt numb, unable to fully process that the nightmare was actually ending. Just like that? He just agrees and it's done? These kinds of agreements hold weight, Ethan said from across the room. They were witnessed by neutral parties from other families. Breaking them would mean war not just with us, but with everyone who witnessed the terms. Arbin's not going to risk that. He's a businessman first. He'll honor the agreement, because violating it costs more than his pride is worth. Nicholas's phone buzzed. He checked it and nodded. The other families are confirming. Word spreading through the criminal network. The Albanian threat to you is officially over. Anyone who comes after you now does it without Arbin's backing and would be violating a witnessed agreement. That's a death sentence in this world. Ellie looked between them, still struggling to believe it. "So I can go home, back to my apartment, live normally?" "Yes," Nicholas said simply. "Though I hope you'll choose not to." "What do you mean?" He stood, moving to the window despite his injury. During negotiations with Arbin, there were parallel discussions with other parties. Detroit loan sharks, specifically. The ones your father owed money to. I purchased his debt, all $11,500 of it, and canceled it. That vulnerability no longer exists. Ellie's breath caught. "You said you wouldn't do that. I told you I didn't want—" "You said you didn't want charity or to owe me favors," Nicholas interrupted. "This isn't either. This was strategic elimination of a potential weakness. As long as those debts existed, someone could have used them for pressure or leverage. I remove that possibility. The debt no longer exists. That's still you controlling my life. That's me protecting you completely. He turned to face her. And there's more. The restaurant your father lost. The one your grandmother built in Detroit. I located the current owner, who'd been trying to unload it for 2 years. I purchased it through intermediaries. The property is now in your name, transferred legally. You own it free and clear. Ellie stood slowly, her mind struggling to process the information. You bought my grandmother's restaurant? The building and land, yes. What you do with it is entirely your choice. Sell it, reopen it, tear it down and build something else. It's yours. She should have been angry, should have felt manipulated or controlled. Instead, she felt something crack open in her chest. A wound she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for 6 years. The restaurant her father had lost, the symbol of his failures and her family's destruction, was hers now. Not a burden anymore. A possibility. Why? Her voice came out rough. Because you deserved closure. Because that place meant something to you beyond money or property. Because I can give you that, and it cost me nothing compared to what you've sacrificed because of me. Nicholas crossed back to her. And because I'm trying to show you that what I feel for you isn't about control or obligation. It's about caring for someone and wanting to give them the things that matter. Ellie's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. That's too much. The debts, the restaurant, it's all too much. It's exactly right, he said firmly. You saved my life. You got dragged into a war you didn't start. You've handled everything with more grace and strength than anyone could reasonably expect. This isn't charity or manipulation. This is me trying to give you back some of what you lost. She looked at this man who'd entered her life through violence, who operated in a world of consequences she barely understood, who'd just come back from a firefight with a bullet wound he was treating like a minor inconvenience. This dangerous, complicated man who was offering her freedom and closure wrapped in gestures that should have terrified her. My brother, Nicholas said quietly. Marco. I told you he died in a car bomb 5 years ago. I remember. I never found who ordered it. Never got justice or revenge or even understanding. I've carried that weight every day since, wondering if I'd been more careful, more paranoid, if I could have saved him. His dark eyes held hers. When that Mercedes exploded, and you were underneath me, debris raining down, I realized I had a chance I didn't get with Marco, a chance to actually protect someone who mattered, to not lose someone else to this life. I'm not your brother. No, but you're someone I care about. Someone who deserves better than living in fear and looking over her shoulder forever. So yes, I eliminated the debt and bought the restaurant. I'd do it again. I'd do more if I could. Ellie reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of stubble, the warmth of living skin. Thank you. For all of it, even though it terrifies me how much power you have to change my life with a few phone calls. That power only matters if I use it to help, not control. Nicholas covered her hand with his. I'm not trying to own you, Ellie. I'm trying to free you. She believed him. Maybe that was naive, maybe dangerous, but she believed the sincerity in his voice and eyes. So it's really over? The Albanians, the threats, all of it? It's over. You're safe. You can go back to your apartment if you want. Resume your life. Or, he paused, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. Or you could stay. Keep working with the restaurants. Keep being part of this complicated mess we've built. The choice is entirely yours. Ellie looked around the expensive apartment that had been her cage and sanctuary for weeks. Looked at Nicholas with his bandaged arm and exhausted eyes. Looked at Ethan in the kitchen, pretending not to listen while definitely listening. I don't know what I want yet, she admitted. Everything's been chaos and survival for so long. I need time to figure out what normal even looks like anymore. That's fair, Nicholas agreed. Take all the time you need. The job offer stands regardless. You're good at what you do. The restaurants are better with you involved. That's business reality, not personal favors. She appreciated that distinction more than he probably realized. Can I see the property deed? For the restaurant? He pulled out his phone, swiped through files, then showed her. There it was, legal and official. The building on Gratiot Avenue in Detroit, the one her grandmother had opened 50 years ago, now registered in Ellie Wells's name. "I need to sit down," she said quietly. Nicholas guided her to the couch, sat beside her, and just let her process. The war was over. The debts were cleared. Her grandmother's legacy was restored. And she was somehow more terrified now than when people were actively hunting her. Because now she had to figure out what came next, without the structure of survival driving every decision. "One step at a time," Nicholas said, reading her expression. "You don't have to decide everything today. What happens with us?" The question escaped before she could stop it. He considered for a moment before answering. "That depends entirely on what you want." "I know what I want. I want you in my life, whatever form that takes. But you've been living under extraordinary circumstances. Now that the pressure's gone, you might realize you don't want any part of this world. And I'd understand that. But you'd be disappointed." "Yes," he admitted. "But I'd respect it. Your choice, your life, your decision. No pressure, no manipulation. Just honest wanting and respectful acceptance of whatever you choose." Ellie leaned against him carefully, mindful of his injured arm. "I don't have answers right now. I just know I'm exhausted and relieved and terrified all at once. That's normal after everything you've been through." Nicholas pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Rest. Process. Figure things out. I'm not going anywhere." They sat together in silence while the city moved outside the windows, while life continued for people who didn't know how close they'd come to a war in their streets. And Ellie, for the first time in weeks, let herself imagine a future that wasn't defined by fear. 3 months had a way of changing everything and nothing simultaneously. Ellie stood in front of the mirror in her Upper West Side apartment, adjusting the neckline of her burgundy dress. The color was rich without being flashy, elegant without trying too hard. Perfect for tonight's reopening of Fiore d'Oro, the restaurant where everything had started with fire and violence and a red wire that shouldn't have been there. The apartment around her was hers. Actually hers, paid for with salary, she earned directing culinary operations for 3 restaurants. $2,800 a month in rent came out of her bank account like clockwork. No favors, no strings, just honest work compensated fairly. The space was smaller than Nicholas's place, obviously, but it had her furniture, her books, her grandmother's worn recipe cards framed on the kitchen wall. She'd moved out of the Upper East Side apartment 6 weeks ago, needing to prove to herself that she could exist independently in this new version of her life. Nicholas had helped with the move without complaint, never once suggesting she should stay in his protected bubble. He understood what she needed even when she couldn't articulate it clearly. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Downstairs. Take your time." Ellie grabbed her coat and bag, took one last look in the mirror, and headed down. The Blacktown car waited at the curb, Nicholas leaning against it in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. He straightened when he saw her, his expression shifting from neutral to something warmer. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up okay yourself." She let him open the car door for her, sliding into the familiar leather interior. They'd fallen into this rhythm over the past months, working together during the day, restaurant inspections and menu planning and staff training. Dinners together most evenings, either at his place or hers, slowly building something that felt real instead of forged in crisis. The physical relationship had developed naturally, carefully, both of them aware that they were navigating complicated territory. Ellie had given her FBI deposition 7 weeks ago, a formal 3-hour interview with Nicholas's lawyer present. She described the valet, the red wire, the explosion, everything she could remember. The agents had been professional, almost sympathetic, clearly understanding she'd been caught in something beyond her control. The investigation into the car bombing had stalled after the Albanians withdrew from contested territories. Without active cooperation from surviving witnesses, and with the primary suspects having left the jurisdiction, the case remained open, but inactive. Ellie had been told they might need follow-up testimony if the case progressed, but she wasn't holding her breath. "Nervous?" Nicholas asked, as they drove through evening traffic. "A little," Ellie admitted. "It's strange going back there. Last time I was at Fiore d'Oro, Someone tried to blow you up in the parking area. Different valet service now, he said dryly. Thoroughly vetted. The restaurant looked transformed. The explosion damage had been completely repaired and the entire facade renovated. New windows, new entrance, subtle lighting that made the building glow warmly against the darkening sky. A small crowd had already gathered outside, well-dressed people waiting for the doors to open. Ethan stood near the entrance, coordinating security with practiced discretion. 6 other men Ellie recognized from Nicholas's organization were positioned strategically around the perimeter, trying to look like regular guests, but fooling no one with their watchful eyes and obvious earpieces. Is all this security really necessary? Ellie asked as they approached. Probably not, Nicholas admitted. But it makes me feel better. Humor me. They entered together, Nicholas's hand resting lightly on the small of her back. The gesture was proprietary but not possessive, a statement more than a claim. People noticed. Of course they noticed. Nicholas Pellegrini arriving with a woman, treating her like she mattered, walking through the door together as equals, rather than boss and employee. The dining room sparkled. New fixtures, refinished floors, tables set with linens so white they almost glowed. The kitchen, visible through the open window, showed gleaming equipment and chefs already working with choreographed precision. Antonio was there, leading the team Ellie had trained over the past months. He caught her eye and nodded respectfully. "Miss Wells," the hostess greeted warmly. "Mr. Pellegrini, your table is ready." They were led to a private corner table with a view of both the dining room and the street outside. Ellie could watch the organized chaos of opening night while maintaining some semblance of privacy. Nicholas held her chair, waited until she was settled before taking his own seat. The restaurant filled quickly. Ellie recognized some faces from the other Pellegrini establishments. Others were clearly from Nicholas's world, men and women who moved with that particular awareness that came from living in dangerous circles. They nodded respectfully to Nicholas, their eyes lingering curiously on Ellie before moving on. No one approached the table, no one interrupted. "They're speculating about us," Ellie observed quietly. "Let them speculate." Nicholas poured water from the carafe on their table. "What we are is our business, not theirs." "And what are we exactly?" He looked at her directly, his dark eyes serious. "We're 2 people who found each other in the worst possible circumstances and decided to build something real anyway. We're partners, equals. Whatever labels you want to put on it, that's the foundation." A waiter appeared with wine, the good stuff from the reserve list Ellie had personally curated. They went through the ritual of tasting and approving, then ordered dinner. Antonio had prepared a special tasting menu for tonight, showcasing techniques Ellie had helped him rediscover. Traditional preparations elevated with modern precision. The first course arrived, a simple caprese that was anything but simple. Buffalo mozzarella so fresh it still held warmth, tomatoes at perfect ripeness, basil that smelled like summer. Ellie took a bite and nodded with satisfaction. This was what food should be. Honest, excellent, unpretentious. "You've done amazing work with these restaurants," Nicholas said, watching her enjoy the food. "Revenue is up across all 3 locations. Customer satisfaction scores improved significantly. You've built something real here." "We built it," Ellie corrected. "You gave me the platform and resources. I just used them well. Don't diminish your contribution. You're genuinely talented. The restaurants were profitable before, but they're exceptional now. That's your doing." The praise warmed her more than it probably should. She'd spent so much of her life feeling like she was falling short, chasing dreams that stayed perpetually out of reach. These past months had been the first time she'd felt truly successful at something that mattered. Between courses, Nicholas reached into his jacket and produced a cream-colored envelope. He set it on the table between them, not offering it yet, just letting it exist there. "What's that?" Ellie asked. "Something I should have given you weeks ago, but the timing never felt right." He slid it across the white tablecloth. "Open it." Ellie picked up the envelope carefully, feeling the weight of quality paper. Inside was a single document, folded once. She opened it and read, her breath catching as the words registered. Property deed. The address on Gratiot Avenue in Detroit. Her grandmother's restaurant. The one her father had lost. The one Nicholas had purchased weeks ago. But the document was dated yesterday. Transfer of ownership from Nicholas Pellegrini to Ellie Marie Wells. You already told me you bought it, she said, voice tight with emotion. Weeks ago. I bought it, yes. But it's been in legal limbo while we handled the paperwork properly. As of yesterday, the transfer is complete. The property is legally yours, free and clear. No mortgage, no liens, no strings. You own it outright. Ellie stared at the deed, at her name printed in official legal text. The building her grandmother had opened in 1973. The place where her mother had grown up, where her father had worked before addiction destroyed everything. The symbol of her family's rise and catastrophic fall. Now it was hers. Not a burden anymore. A possibility. I don't know what to say. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let tears fall in public. You don't have to say anything. It's yours to do with as you please. Sell it if you want. Reopen it if that interests you. Demolish it and build condos. The choice is entirely yours. I'm giving you the property, not expectations about what you do with it. Why? The question came out rougher than intended. Why do this? The debts were one thing, strategic elimination of vulnerabilities. But this is personal. This is my history, my family, my pain. Why invest in that? Nicholas leaned forward, his full attention focused on her. Because that restaurant represents everything you've overcome. Your grandmother's courage coming to a new country. Your family's hard work building something from nothing. Even your father's failures. They're part of the story. That building holds your history, good and bad. You deserve to own that history instead of being owned by it. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. My brother Marco died 5 years ago. Car bomb, just like they tried with me. I never got closure. Never got justice or even understanding. I've carried that weight every day since, wondering if I could have prevented it somehow. His eyes held hers, raw honesty in his expression. When you pulled me away from that Mercedes, when you saved me from the same fate, it changed something. Made me realize I could actually protect someone who mattered. Could prevent loss instead of just mourning it. You gave me that chance. This restaurant, clearing your father's debts. These are ways of honoring that, of showing gratitude not with words, but with actions that matter. Ellie's throat tightened. She'd known about Marco, but Nicholas rarely spoke about him directly. Hearing the pain in his voice, understanding how her instinctive action 3 months ago had meant more than just saving a life, it recontextualized everything. I don't know what I'll do with it yet, she said quietly, folding the deed carefully. But thank you for seeing what this means, for not just throwing money at problems, but understanding what actually matters. You're welcome. They finished dinner slowly, savoring each course. Antonio had outdone himself. Every dish was technically perfect, but more importantly, it had soul. The kind of food that reminded you why you loved eating, why cooking was art as much as craft. Other diners approached their table periodically, business associates offering congratulations on the reopening, representatives from other families paying respects. Everyone was polite, deferential, carefully not mentioning Ellie directly, but clearly registering her presence beside Nicholas. She was being seen, acknowledged as someone who mattered in his world. It should have terrified her. Probably should have sent her running. Instead, it felt oddly natural. She'd earned her place here through competence and survival. She wasn't Nicholas's accessory or trophy. She was her own person who happened to be building a life that intersected with his. After dinner, Nicholas led her to a private door at the back of the restaurant. I want to show you something. They climbed a narrow staircase to the roof. Ellie hadn't known the building even had roof access. At the top, a small terrace had been constructed, complete with wrought iron railing and potted plants that would probably die come winter. The view stretched across Manhattan, lights glittering in every direction, the city alive and infinite. This wasn't here before, Ellie said, taking in the space. Addition during renovations. I thought the building should have somewhere peaceful, somewhere you could see the whole city, and remember you're part of something bigger. Nicholas stood beside her at the railing, both of them looking out at the urban landscape. It's beautiful, They stood in comfortable silence, the sounds of the city filtering up from below. Car horns, distant sirens, the general hum of millions of people living their lives. Ellie thought about how different her life was now compared to 3 months ago. Different from a year ago. Different from any version of the future she'd imagined for herself. "I never expected this," she said finally. "Any of this. Working with restaurants at this level. Having actual authority and respect. Being with someone like you. Someone like me," Nicholas repeated with slight amusement. "A criminal, you mean? Someone powerful. Someone who operates in a world I don't fully understand. Someone dangerous." She looked at him directly. "But also someone thoughtful. Someone who keeps his word. Someone who's capable of gentleness despite living in violence. I'm not good," Nicholas said quietly. "I want to be clear about that. I've done things you don't know about and shouldn't know about. I've made choices that hurt people, sometimes permanently. I'm not a hero or a good man struggling against circumstances. I'm what I am, and what I am includes darkness. You're better off not examining too closely." "I know," Ellie said simply. "I'm not naive about who you are or what you do. But I also know who you are with me, how you've treated me. The respect you've shown even when you had all the power and I had none. That matters too. Does it matter enough?" The question was vulnerable in a way Nicholas rarely allowed himself to be. "Enough for you to stay? To keep building this thing between us?" Ellie considered carefully before answering. "I spent 3 years in New York before I met you. Working terrible hours for bad pay, barely scraping by, with no real future except more of the same. I was surviving but not living. Not really." She gestured at the city around them. "Now I'm doing work that matters. Running operations that affect people's livelihoods. Making decisions that have real consequences. I'm using skills I thought were wasted. Building something that feels important. And yes, I'm with someone who makes me feel valued in ways I didn't know were possible." "But?" Nicholas prompted, hearing the hesitation. "But I'm also realistic. Your world is dangerous. There will be other conflicts, other wars, other situations where violence is the solution. I can't pretend that away or convince myself it won't happen." She turned to face him fully. "What I'm saying is, I'm choosing this with eyes open. Choosing you. Choosing this life. Knowing exactly what it includes. Not because I'm naive or desperate or don't have other options, but because despite everything, this is where I want to be." Nicholas pulled her closer, his hands warm on her waist. "That's all I needed to hear. That you're choosing this freely, not because you feel trapped or obligated." "I'm free," Ellie confirmed. "Probably freer than I've ever been, and I'm choosing you." He kissed her then, slow and thorough, like they had all the time in the world. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, the city continued sparkling around them, indifferent to the small human moments happening on a rooftop in Manhattan. "We should get back down," Nicholas said eventually. "People will notice we're gone." "Let them notice." But Ellie smiled, taking his hand as they headed back toward the stairs. The restaurant was still full when they returned, the reopening celebration continuing successfully. Ethan gave them a knowing look but said nothing, just continued his quiet supervision of security. Antonio sent out a complimentary dessert, his way of showing appreciation for Ellie's training. Everything moved smoothly, professionally, exactly as a successful restaurant should operate. They left together near midnight, the last guests departing with satisfied expressions. In the car heading back uptown, Ellie held the property deed carefully, thinking about Detroit, about her grandmother, about the complicated legacy now literally in her hands. "I might reopen it," she said quietly. "The Detroit restaurant. Not right away. Maybe in a year or two, once I have more experience. But I like the idea of bringing it back, honoring my grandmother's vision properly. Whatever you decide, I'll support it." Nicholas's hand found hers in the darkness of the car. "You don't need permission or approval. Just know that whatever resources you need, they're available. Not charity, investment in something worthwhile." Ellie squeezed his hand, accepting the offer for what it was. Partnership, trust, mutual investment in each other's success. The car dropped her at her apartment building first. Nicholas walked her to the door, kissed her goodnight, promised to see her tomorrow for a scheduled meeting with suppliers. Normal things. Regular relationship things. The kind of ordinary moments she'd wondered if she'd ever have again during those first terrifying weeks. Upstairs in her apartment, Ellie set the property deed on her kitchen counter beside her grandmother's framed recipe cards. Past and present, failure and redemption, all of it sitting together in the space she'd built for herself. She made tea she didn't really want, just needing the ritual. Through her windows, the city glowed with endless lights, millions of lives intersecting and diverging in patterns too complex to track. She was part of that pattern now. Not just surviving in the margins, but actively participating, building, creating something meaningful. 3 months ago, a car had exploded because she'd noticed something wrong. That moment of instinct had destroyed her old life completely and irreversibly. But it had also opened doors she'd never known existed, given her opportunities she'd never have found on her own, connected her with someone who saw her value when she'd felt invisible. It wasn't a fairy tale. Nicholas wasn't a prince, and she wasn't a rescued princess. They were two complicated people who'd found each other through violence and chosen to build something real from those ashes. It was messy and imperfect, and sometimes morally complicated. But it was honest. It was theirs, and it was the life Ellie Wells had chosen with eyes wide open. She finished her tea and prepared for bed, already thinking about tomorrow's meetings, next week's menu revisions, the 1,000 small decisions that made up her new normal. Outside, the city never slept. Inside, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Ellie felt genuinely at peace with where she was and who she'd become. The future remained uncertain, still dangerous in ways she couldn't fully predict, but she'd learned something crucial over these past 3 months. She was strong enough to handle whatever came next, smart enough to navigate complicated waters, brave enough to choose difficult paths when they led somewhere worth going. And that knowledge, more than safety or security or any promise of protection, was the gift Nicholas Pellegrini had really given her. Not rescue, not salvation, just the opportunity to discover exactly how capable she'd always been, waiting for circumstances that would force her to prove it.